This is Tom Sugarman.
Hiya, Tom.
Hi.
Sugarman.
Nice to meet you.
You related to Arnold
He
Sugarman?
used to have
No.
he used to have a customer by the name of Sugarman.
Oh, really? No.
Yeah. Did Arnold come from Chicago or New York originally?
Arnold came from New York.
Oh, he came from New
Oh,
York.
he died about 12 years
Oh,
ago.
more- 12 years ago.
Maybe more.
You're kidding,
My
maybe
grandfather
almost
was-
30.
My grandfather was Canadian.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
I don't know. I don't
I
know.
got-
What,
I
I
got
don't know
a
what city in
little
Canada.
thing
My
around.
grandmother was from New York,
Great.
but they never lived in New
You
York
read my
when
book.
she was married.
It gives you a
Oh, I
little
see.
input,
I brought it for a signing.
but I got, oh, that's it.
Yeah.
Oh, so your
I got two
grandparents
tapes.
are actually from Canada?
One is recent, one is from 1994. I'm going to edit it as we go along
Yeah.
for the purpose of saving time.
Right.
Okay.
Well, my
It was
parents
taken
were
at
from,
Holocaust
Eastern Europe.
Memorial in the Aviation and Troop Command
Oh, yeah.
in St. Louis, Missouri.
Oh,
And I was invited as a guest speaker with all these generals and
They never
colonels.
lived in New York.
And I think you'd find that very
I
interesting.
love that, yeah.
It's one of them. But there's certain things you're gonna see me race it
So
through.
your
which
father,
it's boring
your
and it's time
father
consuming.
evidently came from,
What's interesting about the
Russia
tape,
or
you have to know in
Ukraine or
advance,
something like that?
My
is that it was taken in 1994 in modern times with colored
Yeah, it must have been from,
technology.
from one of the,
They
Slavic
sent it to the
countries.
Pentagon in Washington, and they dubbed in the
Oh,
black
yes,
and white footage
like
because they
my
didn't have
parents did.
they didn't have Technicolor
Right.
in those days. So I just give you the background on
And
that
they
one.
changed.
Great.
And the second tape, that's a 35-minute tape which I cut to about 15 or 20 minutes. Those are the most important things. The next tape was just taken recently. I had nothing to do with that. It was a surprise.
That's a
It was
very
one of my
nice
buddies
name,
with the
though,
Silver
that's
Star.
very-
He speaks
it's
on
very-
television
it's
in New
very
Jersey.
unusual.
And he's, much to my surprise, sent me the tape, and there I was.
Really?
Yeah, well, so you'll see that one too. There's not much to cut. If I can cut through it, I will, because it is a 20-minute tape.
Yeah, well,
And then I just want to show you some things quickly
That had a hyphen on it.
of what I accumulated through years.
Had a hyphen
And the
on
stuff
it.
that's in the book is in 2 museums.
Oh, wow.
You know that.
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't-
you told me that you
I'm going to
donated.
show you my museum, but these are not, put that stuff
I'm gonna
down.
run to the back.
This is where I was captured, okay? Now, nobody could take a picture of that. It's the inside of a cave. See, so I don't know how you can manipulate that. That's an artist's conception, because nobody can photograph. That cave was a block long, and there were 50 Italian women in there. Well, you read it in the book, okay? And that's it. But some guy in Hawaii drew this. And when he sent it to me, I was flabbergasted.
Did it look like it?
So, yeah, oh yeah, it looks like it. But we didn't have he put a medic in there. You can see the Red Cross.
Yeah.
We didn't have a medic in there. There was only 6 of us, and there's 9 of those guys.
That picture, he was declared POW of the year
Yeah.
that year.
That's
Those are supervisors, you know,
we have a board of supervisors here.
board of
This is the
supervisors.
President of the United States in the Tuna, Italy, on a cemetery. He claimed his father was there in battle. I told him I was captured within a 5-mile radius.
And that's
of
the
that area.
invitation we got from the
That's the
president.
actual invitation, and there's Hillary with my wife. And there's Bob Dole at the same place with me and my
We
wife.
sat with him.
And that's from the president and the mayor of Rome making me an honorary citizen in 1994 on the 50th anniversary. That's where I got captured at Anzio. That's it right there. That's all in Italian.
And those are all
Now,
his medals.
the copies of those are in 2 museums. In the Jewish War Veterans, where you are with Herb, it's in there. And the others are in the Andersonville, Georgia, the Civil War Cemetery. And they want me to come out as a docent for 5 days for school education. Now, they got the gun that you saw that I escaped with, that you read about. They got the map. Only they don't know that the original map is right on the wall here. It was falling apart, so I didn't give it to them. And I spent a lot of money to give them photocopies. What do you call them? Laser copies. Okay. These are all my medals here, documented. Right there, there's 17. And, okay.
Go ahead and
Where should I?
scoot right
Just
in.
point.
You point.
This is the best medal
With the
of
air
all.
conditioner on, it's kind of warm in
This
here.
is the most that people don't know about. This is the Combat Infantry badge. It's the only medal you get paid for. In those days, today's a joke, but it was $10 a month on your pay schedule. So that to me was the greatest medal. That's what I looked like when I came home and met my wife. I weighed 102 pounds at the time. I was 174 when it went over. These are the 2 bronze stars and they sent me 3 of them. I don't know why, but I only got 2 acknowledgements. The 3rd one is on a bar. This is the French Croix de Bois for Saint-Tropez and Martinique. The Croix de Bois, my unit in Saint Martinique, which is Saint-Tropez, we conquered that city. And I was already a prisoner by then. This is the presidential citation for the Battle of the Caves. These are 2 of the 3 Purple Hearts that I was supposed to get. Purple Hearts. I didn't get the 3rd one, and for some reason, rather I didn't pursue it. See, I actually got 3 Purple Hearts and 2 Bronze Stars. And what they did was they sent me 3 Bronze Stars and 2 Purple Hearts. So I don't put the other one up. This is the American Ex-Prisoner of War Medal. Am I going too fast?
No, I was just trying to get your face in.
Okay. This is the American Ex-Prisoner of War Medal. And that's a very highly acknowledged medal in the United States. It gives us tremendous privileges. There's only 40,000 of us alive, and we're dying at the rate of 1,500 a month because of our age. This is the United Kingdom, the International POW Medal from England. My friend is a lord. This is the Good Conduct Medal. This is the American Campaign Ribbon. And this is the European Theater of Operations, the European African Middle Eastern Medal, but they had to give me 2 of these. You only get 1. The reason they gave me 2 of them, I had too many battle stars, and they didn't fit on there. So what they did is they put 1 silver battle star on here, which is equivalent to 5 battles, and then they put 3 bronze battle stars, so that makes 8 battles, plus the arrowhead for invasion forces. So that's why I got 2. I don't know what this is. This is the Occupational Medal. And this is the New York Congressman's Medal of Honor from New York State. So it doesn't belong on there because it's not a government medal. This one is the Victory Medal. I have to read it myself. That's a Victory Medal. And that's the discharge that I got. And those are my dog tags that I threw away. You read it in the book, didn't you? I threw it away or I wouldn't be here.
Why wouldn't you be here?
Because they put an H on the dog tags, and the Germans were looking for that H. H means Hebrew. See, and I figured, and that's only for purposes of being buried. And at that point, you don't worry about where you're going to be buried. So if you read the book, if you recall, I haven't read the book myself in a long time.
Maybe you wrote it.
I put it down, yeah, but it's hard to read. I put it down in the latrine, in Latrina, in Italy. There was a acid that we used for toilets, and I just dumped it down in there. From there on, by the time I got to Germany, when they asked me about my dog tags, I said, I was shaving when I was captured. See, when you're captured, when you're shaving, you take your dog tags off, hang it up on the side, and you strip to the waist. So they bought it, you know. But still, I had a lot of problems with them. Anyway, that's about everything over here. Now here, these are documents and photographs, actual photographs. Now this, Steve, if you can compare it with the book, you can see what I was screaming about, the cheap photography. This is the actual cell that I occupied on November the 15th to November 20th in Dachau. This here wood fit in this. This was a toilet bowl, this white spots. See, there it is clear. Is that clearer for
Do me
you?
a favor when you, is it possible to?
No, not
you
easy.
Can't even take them out.
No.
Because I get all this reflection.
Well, I
can't
got
really see them.
pictures right there that are movable if
Okay.
you want. If that will help you any.
Okay.
See? Now this wall, Steve, see this here? This was a toilet here. This was the sink. If you remember, I told you I was washing myself there and didn't realize it until 2 years later that the soap I was using was the fat that was rendered from the Jews. The crematory was to the left of this window, the 5 ovens. And they were rendering the fat and making soap out of it. It was a small bar, and I tried to describe it the best way I knew how. And it smelled of perspiration. Now I got a movable picture right there. My wife is standing right next to it. If you want to maneuver it, see it? So she may want to enlarge that. That may help her. But this is all interesting here. This is the actual map I used to escape the second time to Switzerland. This is a German map, but I carried it in my boot, and it's so badly damaged. What I did was I lasered it at Kinko, and I sent it to the 2 museums. They don't really like that. They don't know. I told them this was destroyed. But this is the actual map. But if I gave it to them, it would fall apart. See, this is the actual escape route, and this is where I got this captain that you read about, that his gun that you saw the picture. I had that here until 1998, until I gave it to the museum.
It's written up in the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah,
too.
oh, that's the Wall Street. That has nothing to do with my military career. That's, anyway,
What about that picture up there?
now this one here now is an actual photograph on Christmas, December 44, in Stalag 7B. That's where my trouble was. I was the leader of the camp in Augsburg, Arbeit Commando 663B, and when the 340 men I had were transferred with me into this camp, there were 900 men here. We now had 1,200 men, and they didn't have a leader. The 340 insisted that I'm their leader. And so we had a big problem, which you got in the book, about the Red Cross parcels. And they said that I was a Jew, and a Jew is not allowed to be a leader. And the next morning, they moved me out. Memmingen is pretty close to Dachau. Matter of fact, Rommel lived right across the street from us, or his wife and children. Now, most of these guys are dead. I just wrote him a letter. It's on the couch. Jim Witherington. He's very, very ill. That's me at 102 pounds. I went down from 174, and that's what I looked like when she met me. This guy's dead, this guy's dead, this guy's dead, this guy is almost dead in Brooklyn. I can't even count. These are all dead. This guy just popped up in the letter that he's still alive. He's having a heart problem, and he's very sick in Florida. This guy was my best buddy, and he's the only prisoner I wrote about in the book. That it was a strange thing with him. He traveled, this is an RAF guy from the Royal Air Force, Reginald Simmons. But Joe Levine was in every prison camp that I was in. And that's unusual. He followed me into, we got separated along the way, most of us. But he was one of the few guys outside of, when I hit Dachau, he went in another direction. So he's one of the few. I just got this couple of months ago from Secretary of Defense in recognition of my contribution to the Cold War. And I keep getting, there's the medals over there, I keep getting them, I haven't been getting any room for them. This is something my wife picked up. This was my actual insignia until Hitler adopted it. The 157th Regimental Combat Team, this was their insignias. This was their, an Indian, it's an Indian insignia.
Yeah,
And then they went and changed it after Hitler adopted it. So that's about everything that I'm going to go into here. These are other awards, but they're not.
I remember meeting Joe Levine.
That's
Remember
right.
him?
That was his
Yeah,
last
he was
visit.
with us.
Did his wife die too?
Yeah.
N-
I
no,
don't
no,
know.
no, no.
We don't know that.
No,
We
she's
have
still
no
alive.
idea. How
Yeah.
do you know she's alive?
As far as I know, she's alive.
No,
Yeah.
she most probably is.
Well, Jim just asked me, did Lou write to me? And Lou is in touch with her. He's in Massachusetts. So anyway, that's the. This is one of my favorite things. This is made in China, believe it or not, and they gave it to us at the POW's outreach programs. This is the back of this. And this is very interesting. If you can get this printing, I don't know how good you are, but if you can get this, it's very interesting. Those, I continued shooting after the war,
You know,
and I won all those medals in international
had
tournaments.
Christmas cards every
Henry,
year
walk this
come
way
out.
so she's in the light. Thanks.
And also,
Okay.
believe it or not, Clinton keeps sending us Christmas
Now here's,
cards. We're not
I
even
don't have an
thinking about it.
extra copy of that. Behind that is the Japanese prisoners. I hated to do that to them,
Yeah.
but I wanted to frame this. And that was written by veterans in the Veterans Hospital. So this is one of the best accolades that I could get is from the veterans themselves, because these guys have their own stories. So, and that paper has been discontinued. It's about 5 years ago. That's my entire campaign is right here. I don't know if you can read the print on that thing.
That's Europe and North Africa.
Yeah, the back of it is specific. And I'm a charter member of this, and I'll be back there in November. But this is my campaign right here, through Africa, Sicily, and Italy. And the documentation that I got from the Navy over there verifies the fact that the biggest invasion in history was not Normandy, it was Sicily. We had 7 American divisions there, not counting anybody else, against 5 that fought in Normandy. So it was a tremendous campaign. But we were wiped out. My unit was wiped out, 15,000 men. We had 62,000 men in the unit. That means we were wiped out 4 times. And we had 511 days. But if you see the tape, you'll see this.
You're gonna go to that
Yeah.
when it's finished.
Well, this is the.
World War II Memorial.
Yeah. Now the only other thing that I'm really very proud of is not my book as much as this. This guy talked to me, came here, talked a lot on the phone, and this is about my unit, the Rock of Anzio. He's a hell of a nice. This is a professional writer. He wasn't even in my outfit. He was in Vietnam. So that's what makes this good. The inscription here. Where did he write it? Oh, Flint Woodlock to Henry Kaufman, with sincere appreciation for your help in telling this incredible story. Well, that's nothing compared to what he gave me.
Hold on,
Oh, okay. Well, he gave me something even better. I can't glue it in there. It's right here somewhere. Oh, there it is. Yeah. I don't know if you can get this whole. I prefer this. I'll read it out loud if you want. It says, "Dear Mr. Kaufman, thanks so much for your kind words. As a fellow author, you know that one never knows how something you've written will be received by a reader. This is especially true when someone is writing the history of a time or event in which the author did not personally experience." That's him. "It is very gratifying when someone such as you says, 'We got it right,' for all the special things you do. Again, thanks for writing your book and your letters, and thanks for your courage in World War II. All the best, Flint Woodlock." Now, my general signed this. He's still alive. He's 84 years old. And there he is. There's the general, Felix Sparks.
What about
And then
the Medal of
the
Honor?
Congressional Medal of Honor. That's Vandervoort.
He's a Indian.
He's
The
in
sparks that was shot out of the tree, or you talked about Sykes or something like that?
Sparks.
Sparks.
Yeah, up on a loft.
Yeah.
I thought he was killed. That was an interesting story by itself. But I did put that in my book of how I thought he was dead. See, and all these are autographed, and there's 72 pages in there about me. So I'm very proud of this book. Very proud. And this is on the TV. This picture here of me shaking hands, and there's a whole program there that I got the tape, which I'd like to show you, because that's not me speaking about me. See, I'm much prouder when somebody else speaks about me than I do, because I feel a little bit, not so much now, but I feel a little awkward, you know, like I'm boasting or something.
But you could respond to specific questions.
Yeah.
Well, you want to go sit in the room?
Yeah, you want to close the clock? Are you through, Connie?
Is that you and your brothers right here?
Yeah, that was just before I went overseas. Those were superimposed pictures. Of course, I think you read in my book that we were never together in our entire
The
lifetime.
little one wasn't in the service. He's just
All
ran
four
out
of us
his
were never together at any
cul-de-sacs.
one time, and you know, because we were orphans.
The little one went
So
in
we never.
later on to the
And
military.
there we are again.
Accepted him.
This is
Not
after
World War
I
II,
came
it
back.
was in World War II.
That's after I came back. So there's the actual manuscript right there that I was talking to you about, Steve. Right there. It's 370 pages.
Wow.
They cut it down. They cut it down to nothing. I think that about covers everything here at the time. There's other books that are written about me from the Pacific. I'm pretty well known to the guys that fought in the Pacific because I'm involved in a lot of things for POWs, especially the guys in the Pacific. So, but that, is there any questions here or anything that
No, I want to sit
we
down and
covered?
ask you
We
some
covered
stuff.
all of that, yeah.
Take faces.
Go ahead, Steve.
All right, we're going to start now. One of the things that I wanted to ask you after reading the book is and that I was impressed with, I was impressed with the whole thing, but I wanted to know how you became a ranger and the circumstances surrounding that.
Well, that's a story by itself. What happened was I joined the Army, and I went to the 100th Infantry Division in Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and I immediately became a machine gunner, a heavy machine gunner in a heavy weapons company. And I guess I became pretty good because I attracted the company commander, who's a captain. He's a big guy. And he was a real military man from an academy. And so I was kind of his pride and joy every time we went on a divisional maneuver. we scored very high with my gun. Of course, needless to say, it's because I was pretty wild with the gun. I chopped down trees and everything. So anyway, he disappeared after my basic training of 3 months. And a month later, he came back. Oh no, and before that, I was reading a book about World War II statistics, and it said that the average life of a machine gunner was 1.5 minutes. And I misinterpreted that. They didn't mean the average life of the gunner. They meant the average life of the machine gun itself. Because once you open fire, everybody zeroes in on you. But I didn't know that at the time. So I said, you know, if I'm going to get killed, I might as well get paid for this. So I went to join the paratroopers in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. They were asking for volunteers. They said you get jump pay, you get additional pay. So I joined the paratroopers. When I got there, after a month of basic training, they told me that I was not in the. I asked them, where's my pay? When I got my pay, how come I didn't get the jump pay? Because I jumped. They said, you're in the 82nd Airborne Division. That's not the same as paratroopers. They jump because they're transported by planes. They're the infantry that moves by planes rather than trucks.
Stand by.
And with the company commander, I said, I joined the paratroopers because I wanted the extra pay, and I'm jumping for nothing. I'll go back to my own company. He said, fine. And because they had a surplus of volunteers anyway. So they sent me back to my company. When I got back to my company, I was out of there a month. There's Captain Karras. He's back from wherever he was. And he says to me, I just came back from Scotland. And he was training with a guy by the name of Colonel Darby in Scotland with the 1st Ranger Battalion that Roosevelt at first rejected them because he considered them a suicide squad. And when the word kamikaze came out with the Japanese kamikaze planes that they committed suicide, he said, Americans don't do that. You know, I'm not asking these people to commit suicide. So Darby had to convince him it's not suicide, the commandos are doing it. So he was being trained by the commandos, and the commandos, unbeknown to most people, Lord Mountbatten learned the commando tactics in Chicago from the Al Capone gangsters. That's what that was all about, and most people don't know that. And so Darby thought that, hey, gangsters came from America, we can do better than the commandos, and he fused with them for the training period. Of course, they made fun of us in the beginning. Now, I wasn't there. This was unbeknown to me. So Karras told me that he's got the former, he just came from there, he knows the training, he's on a cadre, and he's going to form a Ranger battalion, and he's got to get 500 volunteers, and you give up everything. You give up your furloughs, your passes, and you're going to be locked up. This is what they told me. And you don't get any extra pay. And if you're a lieutenant, you're going to be a private, because you got to work your way up. And without going into all the elaborate details, we had to get this training, and nobody was prepared for it. To make a long story short, I'm not sure if it was 500 or 400 men, but the fact was there was 150 of us that survived the training. And to give you an idea of it, most of that training was classified up until 10 years ago, even during the Vietnam War, which the Green Berets adopted from the Rangers. It's all passed down. But the things like the Bangalore torpedo, the gas, we were prepared for every type gas warfare. And no soldier was prepared for that except chemical warfare. So I knew every type gas. I knew which was the most dangerous. I knew how to handle it. My uniform that I came back was impregnated against gas. I had what they call, it's still in my warehouse, by the way. I don't have it here. I'd like to put it on. I have what we call a zoot suit. It had about 50 pockets. And you have to learn, just like the rifle, when you take it apart, every pocket had a specific use. Up here there was 2 with potassium chloride and sulfuric acid. And we were trained to, if we got our own cars or a German car, well, the Germans used kerosene. But if we can get a bottle with gasoline, fill it up, and use the potassium chloride and the sulfuric acid, have to hesitate, it's a long time. If you put them together, you throw them at a tank, that's the end of the tank. They got to come out. So you don't even have to fire at the tank, because that'll make that tank into an oven. Now, those are things that we didn't invent it. It was a improvisation of a Molotov cocktail, is what it was. But then we had other things. We had to learn what most people didn't know about the double April barbed wire fence, how to construct it rapidly, and how to go over it rapidly. But the guy that went over, the unit that went over it, it was a suicide mission. The guy that had to volunteer was dead, because it was a complicated thing. If I remember correctly, there's what they call a tripwire. Each wire has a name, and it's in a pyramid shape. And the guy that volunteers has to step over the tripwire and drop onto the top of the pyramid with the top wire. You never heard that, right? So you didn't think I could remember it. And what he did is he stretches his hands out and reaches the other tripwire on the other side. So his webbing belt, we had 45 caliber pistols and sub-Thompson machine guns at the time. He reaches for the other wire, and we had leather gloves on one side, and he grabs the other wire. But in combat, when you do that, there's at least 4 machine guns zeroed in right on that spot. So that guy never comes out alive. What's the purpose? Each ranger takes one step. It's a cadence. You take one step to the tripwire, one step in the center of the guy's back, and one step on the other side, and you can get 200 men across that double apron fence within 5 minutes. So if a couple get killed, you got enough there, and each ranger is equipped in firepower for 10 soldiers. This is how they were rated. A battalion of rangers is a fraction of what a battalion of soldiers are. There's 1,000 soldiers in a battalion, a little more, and a ranger battalion is only 200.
So what appealed to you? What appealed to you about the
Karras talked me into it. So he said he wanted me to go with him, and the fact that I passed inflated my ego. So I've gone too far at this point, and the next thing I know is that's the end of Captain Karras. He's a cadre, and the 150 of us that were left out of the 400 that survived, they're supposed to give us certificates. I never got it. And when I applied for it after the war, the unit was dissolved. Anyway, they sent me to Camp Forest, Tennessee, a secret camp for ranger training. It was off limits to everybody, and that's where we got the training. That's where we started using live ammunition on each other, okay, to make sure we don't kill each other. They had it set. I had to zero my machine gun in so that it fired about that much over your head. One little slip and you're dead, because that's a armor-piercing ammunition. But then I learned how to make the Bangalore torpedoes. I learned how to make a toggle bridge. These are things that never materialized as time went on. These are improvised war methods. The Bangalore torpedo opens up a barbed wire fence. It's a chimney. You take it off of any farmhouse. You take the chimney off. You load it, take silk stockings, women's nylon stockings. You load it up with powder, and you make a fuse, and you shove it into the chimney. And then you light the fuse, depending on how fast you want it to get there. That's how big the fuse is. And you slide it under the barbed wire, and you run back in the dark at night. And when that explodes, it rips the barbed wire apart like a doorway, like the Red Sea. You can walk right through. So that was one of the things that was kept really top secret for years. And that wasn't a regular issue from the Army. That's something you improvised. And the toggle bridge, that was another amazing thing, to cross a river. See, we had to have speed to get across fire, rivers, obstacles, barbed wire. So we had to have speed. And it's amazing how with 3 ropes, 200 men can get across a river within, less than 5 minutes.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
You have to run pigeon-toed. Yeah, it's quite awkward, but you have to practice. And you got 1 rope across this way and 2 on each side. And you got to run pigeon-toed, and 200 men can run across that river within 5 minutes. So these are the training we had. The worst training we had I never forgot it, and it's still today. Even the Green Berets complaint that I heard about was the 9-mile march. That was worse than anything else because I don't remember the cadence. You had to go 9 miles in an hour and a half. It's a very fast cadence. By the time you went 6 or 7 miles, somewhere around that, most of us were in the same condition. The whole back of this leg was, on both sides, were almost paralyzed. So that was the most difficult part of the training, because we had to do that at least once a week. Because you had to get to where you were going fast, and then you had to go into combat. So, and of course, you didn't have no pack. You went what we call stripped, with just weapons. But you know, normally we carry a 125-pound pack.
How long was training until you were actually committed?
My training was supposed to be 3 months. But for some reason or other, in about 6 weeks, because I've had the training prior at Fort Jackson, all of a sudden a big secret move came along, and I wound up in they gave me all my gear and told me that they're shipping me out overseas. There was 10 of us, I think, or 12 of us. And they said, we're going overseas. And the next thing I know is I wound up in Fort Meade, Maryland. And no passes, you're not allowed to go. And I went AWOL. My brothers were stationed in the Naval in Brooklyn and in New London, Connecticut. And I wanted to see them before I left. So and the only way I could do that is to go AWOL from Maryland. And I jumped on a train, I got back there, and I saw my brothers, only 2 of them. The other one was in the orphanage. And I went back, and before I even got caught, I was back in camp. And the very next day, they moved me up to Camp Patrick Henry, and the 200 of us went on 200 men, and the 12 Rangers went on the Ponce de Leon troop carrier. There was 200 of us. The fleet itself had about 2,000 ships. And we thought we were going to Alaska because we had fur jackets, and they really fooled us. Instead, we wound up in North Africa at Casablanca as replacements. It was the 2nd Ranger Battalion was being formed at Camp Forest, but they remained there. When I got to Casablanca, I got in with the 3rd Ranger Battalion that was already there, that had trained in England with Derby, with the 1st Ranger Battalion. That was also in Africa. The 3rd Ranger Battalion was heading into Kasserine Pass, which, if you know Africa, it's from one end to the other. Casablanca's on this end, like Los Angeles, and Tunis is the other end, like New York. And Kasserine Pass is in Tunis. By that time, we had conquered the Casablanca, Oran, Algiers. We were now at the end in Tunis and Bizerte, and now we got into the Kasserine Pass, okay? And we were wiped out, the whole battalion. We were in a trap, and unfortunately, it's in the books now, and we admitted it, the British had been fighting for 2 years. You can't train a soldier how to go into combat. You have to put him into combat and then train him. It's 2 different things, and we were being trained for combat, but it was a different thing when you went into combat. So we screwed up. And Montgomery at the time was cursing Patton, and he was cursing Eisenhower and these stupid Yanks that don't know how to fight. Well, if they knew how to fight, we wouldn't have been there in the first place. But we proved that after that battle, we had learned how to fight. But we had to go into combat to learn. And Kasserine Pass was a very dangerous, it was you visualize going into a gully, and the Germans are sitting on one end, they're sitting on the top, and they're waiting for you to come in. And you're trapped. And so everybody got killed, wounded, or captured. I got hurt. I was moved back to a hospital about 800 miles to Oran. I was in a hospital for 2 weeks, and I figured I'm going home for sure. And believe it or not, in comes the 45th Infantry Division from the same place that I came from, Camp Patrick Henry in Hampton Roads in Virginia. And believe it or not, some of the men were casualties on the ship. There was no attack. They got seasick. And really, anyway, they need replacements because, unbeknown to any of us, they were heading for an invasion, which was a big one, Sicily. And they went from Oran, I have to show you on a map, they had to go across. There were 2,700 ships that invaded Sicily. Without Sicily, there couldn't have been a Normandy, because it was hop, skip, and jump. And that was the only way to get on the continent, was from Sicily into, and we misled the Germans because they started to reinforce in Greece. And because they were very afraid that if we failed, that we lost the war, because it would take years to try to recuperate. So that's why we had such large forces, and nobody ever knew that until I read it in Naval Intelligence, which I got here now. I've accumulated a lot of information. It was the biggest invasion in history.
What do you remember most about the invasion?
Huh?
What do you remember most about the invasion?
Well, I remember some bad stuff when number one, they told us the Hormigor paratroopers were coming at us, and we hit different beaches, just like Normandy had different beaches. And I hit a place called Scaglietti, near Gela. And then there was a big feud, a personal feud between Patton and Montgomery that was lingering from Africa. And Montgomery said, I'm not trusting my men in your hands. We're going to do this my way, not your way. And he was trying to take the lead all the time. And that was causing, and we had our orders to do things. And he's not talking about the same troops that were in Africa. We were now hardened soldiers. See, we were really trained. And not that it makes any difference, it's just that I think you're whacked out after a while is what happens. That's what the training is all about. Because if you're not, you're scared. Well, you're scared all the time, but not as much. Once you know what an artillery shell sounds like, or what you don't know what hand-to-hand combat is until you get involved in that. When you train with hand-to-hand combat, it's not the same as a guy coming at you with a real bayonet. You know what he's trying to do. So it's not the same thing.
When was the first time that you encountered hand-to-hand combat?
The only hand-to-hand combat that, to my knowledge, before Rome fell, was at Anzio. That was the first time that I've seen that. And I was using a trench knife. Most people didn't even know what a trench knife was. It's brass knuckles with a knife at the end of it, okay? And they're that close. So, but that was with the 45th. And when I went over, when I joined them, I had 2 days of training going up and down a ship on a rope. Now, the worst thing I've seen was, number one, is we shot our own planes down. Somebody told us the Hormigor paratroopers were coming to reinforce the Germans. Instead, we opened fire like I never saw from the battleships that were in our fleet. And they were shooting down our own planes. And they were shooting down our paratroopers, okay? The next thing I saw happen was when we got near the shore, I guess it happened all along the beach, which I didn't see, is when the Germans opened fire, they prematurely jumped off the LSTs. The gate opened and we ran in, and you don't wait until you hit the dock. You run into the water. Well, that was the wrong water, because that wasn't shallow water, and these guys got 125 pounds on their backs, and you know what happened to them? They drowned. They went right down. There's no way of saving them. So a lot of guys died that way from that. As far as the combat concerned, we took them completely by surprise, and even their casualties were light, but we conquered Sicily because of the force, the tremendous force that we had, within 39 days. We walked across Sicily within 39 days with Patton and Montgomery bickering. And that's the first time I met, was it the first? I'm not sure if it was the 1st or the 2nd Ranger Battalion. They spearheaded on the beach. And after we conquered, then I saw them, But they were no longer wearing their patches. For whatever reason, I don't know. They took the patches away. Then the next thing that happened was Patton got into trouble. And Eisenhower, figuring he's the greatest general that ever lived, but he was a mental case, he hit a guy in the hospital. And he called him yellow, and that was a very bad move. And Montgomery was making fun that that's the kind of generals we have that hit soldiers. You know, he said he called the guy a gold brick, that he was yellow, and he wouldn't fight and get back with your troops, and then he smacked him right in the face. Eisenhower, in order to protect him for the future, he had future plans with Normandy and all that. That was the end of the war, generally speaking, for Patton. He pulled him into England, and he told him to cool off there and just keep quiet now for what he did, because the publicity ran through the whole world. Anyway, we blundered there again. We allowed the Germans to get out. And there's a 20-mile, the Salerno Straits is 20 miles to Italy, to the boot. It's only 20 miles. Now, we could have gone on easily, but we'll never know. What happened was we allowed 100,000 Germans, unbelievable, with all their troops, I guess we didn't think they would happen, to go across the strait. All we had to do was send our fleet in this narrow space, and we had them all. But the only thing I could figure out is that we made the biggest haul in Africa. We captured the elite of the German army. The Africa Corps, which consisted of 125,000 soldiers that were trained for prizes of war, which is against the law. So they were arrogant Germans. Now they captured the whole 125,000, brought them to America. So I guess either they didn't want any more prisoners, or they just didn't think these are the guys that almost killed us, all of us, at Salerno. And that was a historic battle there.
What do you remember about Salerno?
We walked right into the guns, right into it, point blank. They had us, I don't know how anybody got off of Salerno. I don't know how I got off of Salerno. I was right on the beach. And she was on there with me when I took her back in 1994. And I was standing right there where I landed. I couldn't believe that I went in there with the Germans sitting all along for 20 miles with big guns facing us. And Max Schmeling, you ever hear Max Schmeling? Him with the Hermann Göring paratroopers were there. It was an unbelievable battle. And I really don't know how we won it. I really don't know how we won it. But, unbeknown to the world, we were good soldiers. Because we lost battles. We lost Anzio 3 times because the general didn't want to attack, not because of the soldiers. He was afraid of losing the soldiers. So he was too cautious. Lucas, I think was his name. They fired him. That's when I got captured. They fired him on the 23rd. I got captured on the 22nd. They fired him on the 21st. I may have not get captured. So anyway, now, you want to hear the joke of this? The 3rd Ranger Battalion was completely reorganized in Africa. And they stood there. And here they are at Anzio. Now, all the way up along the line was history being made. Forget about Normandy, because according to Brokaw, and this is what I resent, according to most authors, especially Stephen Ambrosi, who became a multimillionaire writing books, there was no World War II. It started in Normandy. Well, you should have seen what happened all the way along the line in Italy to get to Normandy. My outfit was wiped out, like I said. So we had 62,000 troops in the 15,000 division, 15,000 men. But historic battles, Cassino, the Monte Abbey at Cassino, the Venafro Mountains. It were unbelievable battles. And how we lost, but what happened was we won the war. So there's your answer about you lose this battle or you lose this battle as long as you don't lose the war. In the end, we won the war. So we must have done something right, but we had a lot of casualties. We had 95,000, in case you didn't know it, 95,000 prisoners of war that were captured, that were MIA. By the way, every prisoner of war is an MIA. You can't be a prisoner without being MIA. Because you have to be missing in action first. Now that's a story that I've been fighting for 20 years. There's 90,000 Americans that the American society, the government, totally abandoned because they don't want to start World War III. 78,000 of them disappeared in Europe, and they know where they are. They died in Russia, in Siberia, in prison camps. Americans, even though the Russians were allies. There were 2,200 in Vietnam. Now it's down to about 18. They're giving us back the bones piecemeal because we're being persistent. But nobody went after those guys. They're living there. They're there. They're prisoners.
I have a question. From an infantryman's perspective, and not from a person who's gone back and read a lot of books, what's it like to take a beach? You know, what did you do with all the other men when you're boarding the LSTs to hit the beaches in Sicily?
Well, first of all, you see a lot of guys praying when you get into the LSTs because you know, even if it don't happen. Now, it didn't happen at Anzio. We walked right into Anzio. We walked right over the Germans. They were sleeping. It was the biggest surprise in history. And we could have walked right into Rome without any casualties. But the general stopped us. He told us to dig in and stay there. That gave the Germans, see, there's your problem. The generals make the mistakes and it caused lives. But even though I bring up Anzio, I was on an LCI, fast boat, landing craft in the infantry, and we took off from Naples. Now we were, by this time, every one of us were combat-hardened soldiers because we had already fought in Sicily and many, many battles along the line in Salerno and the Caserta, Cassino, Venafro Mountains, Piedmonte, all these places. There were big battles. The Germans refused to. Kesselring was a smart general. I didn't know about him until I read about him, but he was no dummy, especially in the art of defense. But when you go on an invasion like that, you get on a boat when you hit the beach, while you're on the boat, just before, you expect the Germans to, every one of us, the same thought, that you expect them to fire right into your face. They'll blow you to pieces, and they're not firing small guns at you because they're trying to sink the ship, and you can get hit with artillery shells. And a lot of guys get ripped to pieces. You don't even find them. That's what the dog tags are all about. If you find the dog tags, you feel, and you see a couple of arms laying around, a couple of legs, you figure that's the guy. See, it's the dog tags. That's the remains. Most of the guys at Natuna that were killed in invasions that are buried at the Natuna Cemetery, and she went through it with me, there's nobody there. It's just a bone, a guy's leg or an arm, and those dog tags. That's all. And that's what you expect. You know, it's fast. You remember the part, I got a picture there, of the biggest gun in history. It's unbelievable. They captured the gun. My unit captured the gun. They brought it to Maryland, and that's what I wanted to show you. It's a 240 millimeter howitzer. They call it the Leopold gun. We called it Anzio Annie and the Anzio Express. There were two of them, and we could never find them. They were on 24 railroads. That's how big they were. The shell was a block long. You remember the part that I wrote that I was laying in a foxhole, and I never encountered that before? They took the guns out of a tunnel, and that's why we couldn't find them. They rolled it out of a tunnel, and they started firing at us, and they're using what they call traversing and searching fire. I don't know if you know what that means. They fire mostly over your head, long. Then they come down one notch. Then they move one notch this way. They move one notch this way. That's called searching and traversing with a big shell. So if you're dug in, you ain't going nowhere. You're going to stay there. But you figure that next shell is, or the next one or the one after that is going to hit you. And you see the size of the shells. Man, you wouldn't believe them. One of the shells I saw was a real joke. I don't know if I wrote about that. One of the, I don't know if it was a Jew, but the prisoners in Germany were sabotaging the Germans. So one of the shells was a dud. And there was a ticket on the shell saying, I hope this didn't go off and it saved the Allied soldiers. That was right on the shell. So we had all these things, but you know, you imagine certain things are going to happen that really happen. But when they don't happen, you can get a heart attack just because of the relief. It works two ways. And once you get on the beach, and once you get in, you start digging in, then that's another story. By the way, that's another thing that never was divulged and never will be. We weren't supposed to invade Anzio. We had maps to invade Civitavecchia. And it's all, you don't have to be a soldier to know this. Here is Civitavecchia, and here is Anzio. You got to see this picture here. And here's Rome in the middle, okay? And here's, right, okay? Now, at Casino, you can walk to Anzio. Instead, we went back, and we don't question the officers, we went back to Naples to get onto battleships and LSCs and LCIs. And when we got on the ships, we had photographs of houses and this that we were invading, and it wasn't there. Now, what we figured out after the war was we could have walked to Anzio. They made a mistake. They let us off the ship. Civitavecchia, why was Civitavecchia important? The Germans were in Rome. We were trying to get Rome. Instead of a frontal attack, if we went up to Civitavecchia, which was above Rome, we would have cut the Germans off. They couldn't bring supplies into. That made sense, but that never came out. See those blunders like the CIA makes, things like that? They don't tell you that. So, but we know about it. But what are you going to do about it? Now, you know how many men got killed? 3,000 men in my regiment. There were 3,000 men in the 157th Regimental Combat Team. When I say killed, they were wiped out. All 3,000. We were either captured, wounded, or killed. And there was an order out that if anybody got back, we were in a horseshoe. See, we were surrounded in a horseshoe shape. Behind us was the Tyrrhenian Sea. So the only way you can get back is to desert, to get back to the sea. And then where are you going? So you couldn't get out of it. We were really encircled. And that was the fault of one general did that, Lucas. Then the other general came in from the 3rd Division. I don't even know him, Truscott. But that was too late. We were wiped out. So it's not just invasions. Invasions work two ways, you know. Like Normandy invasion, that's an invasion. I didn't have to be there to know what it is. These guys dug in for 2, 3, 4 years. They built pillboxes, cement, concrete, steel. So they are the victors at that point, because for you to get in, you have to suffer tremendous casualties to get in there. But like the Sicilian invasion, the biggest invasion, we had no casualties except for the guys that drowned, because we had such tremendous force and the enemy wasn't prepared for us. Whereas in France, we had to use a lot of chicanery, subterfuge, to fool the enemy as to where we were going to hit. Because if they knew where we were going to hit, Hitler really thought, and Hitler ruined the army there too, because the generals are smart. He thought we were going to hit Calais, the closest point between England and France. And he said that's all crap that he sees with the intelligence and all that. And we went through a lot of subterfuges and with General Patton with false tanks I made out of cardboard. You have no idea the millions of dollars that we spent to deceive the enemy, including taking a guy. There's another story called The Man Who Wasn't There. They took a corpse out of a mortuary in England, and they attached a briefcase to his right hand, a dead person, with no identification of any kind whatsoever, except this briefcase. You know what was in the briefcase? All the plans to invade Calais. They dropped the guy out of a plane somewhere near a neutral territory, either Spain or Portugal. Very interesting story. It's true. Okay, these are all, and all these things, the subterfuges that we went through, and we still lost so many thousands of men. So imagine what happened if we didn't do all that.
Where was the worst fighting for you?
That's hot. Kasserine Pass was bad. Salerno was bad, but I didn't get hurt. But it was very scary. I think the worst part of Salerno was that after 7 or 8 days of combat, when I finally got into a rest area, to think about the next day. You know, you figure that's what happened at Anzio. I said, hey, my luck is running out. And how long can he keep up? I had been wounded 3 times. And you don't think you're going to get, you know, one of the wounds was a real joke. They tried to get us out of the caves. Now that was really registered in West Point. 6 guys fighting off a whole German division. You think we're crazy? We thought there was just a handful of guys out there. We killed about 35 Germans that were laying right outside the entrance of the cave. Because we had, and they adopted that method at West Point. They're teaching them the art of, what do you call it? Of defensive warfare was improvised. In other words, we invented a new way of defending a ground, which they adapted to teach the officers at West Point. 6 soldiers fighting off a whole division. Actually, there were 6 divisions that they brought down. But there was one division that they couldn't get us out of the cave, no matter what they did. We were killing them and picking them off. When I got captured, we had 3 German prisoners in the cave with 50 women, Italian women from Aprilia. You saw the pictures of the Italian women? The girls, 19 years, they killed them as collaborators. And they were living in a cave for protection. They left their houses in Aprilia, which was close by, and went into these caves. And we got into the caves, we were retreating, or we were not allowed to retreat. We were having an orderly withdrawal. American Army don't retreat. And I had 3 German prisoners in there with the machine gun. They were a machine gun group with intact, their own gun, okay? We never used it. We had our own weapons. But we kept picking off the Germans, and one guy got hit 2 days before we were captured. They dropped a grenade right on his back. He crawled up to the edge of the cave. Georgia, I think we called him. Redhead guy, Georgia. He crawled up to the edge of the cave to see where they were. And there was one of the Germans was on top of the cave and dropped a grenade right on top of him. If it was one of our grenades, he would have been dead. It was a potato masher. It was a wooden, so it ripped up his leg pretty bad. So and that was 2 days before. The next day, I got hit with a flamethrower right across my arm. And if it wasn't for the Italian women, I got a scar there. It's just from the sun being burnt and everything, it's diminishing, but it's still there. But it would have never went away if the Italian women, they put the fire out with eggs. The white of the eggs saved my the skin. So that was another experience.
Why were 6 men so effective in fighting off?
The position that we were in. I didn't know that at the time. We found out later we weren't the only cave in that vicinity. There's all kind of rumors about those caves. They were dug in a compartmentalized method. Whether they were using the clay to make bricks out of, to build a city with, or whether they were storing ammunition in World War I in there, they dug it out for a munition dump. The truth is, I don't know. In Italian, it was called the Cava di Pozzolano, the Battle of the Caves. The word caves meant there was more than one. And as I checked it out later on in years, there were 5 caves. Matter of fact, my general was in one of the caves. It was a battalion headquarters cave. But you couldn't see them. Even though they were close by, there was so much foliage that I took pictures of the gullies and the foliage leading to these caves. They weren't gullies, they were called wadis. Dried out riverbeds is what they were. So that was an interesting, the position that we were in, I thought they could never get us out of there. There were 6 of us. And matter of fact, I went to get permission for the 6 of us to get out of there because the women were killing their own babies by accident. They were cooking in the back of the cave, which was a block long. So there was no ventilation, and they were using charcoal. And every day, one woman would come out with a baby, purple, strangled from the charcoal, you know. So and they were screaming, you know how Italian women scream, you have no idea. And we wanted to get out of there. I didn't want the responsibility myself of the German 3 prisoners that I had, although they were very accommodating. They thought the war was over for them. Little did they realize that on the 22nd, this happened on my birthday, the 15th. 7 days later, I was captured on the 22nd. But I went out on a patrol. We drew straws, and I was the one to go look for, at that time, Captain Sparks. And E Company, unbeknown to me, was totally wiped out. He was the commander of E Company. And what happened is, of course, I meet with him every year. So I talk to him on the phone. He's in Colorado. And we have a lot of laughs. It's funny, when you look back, you could laugh. When I got to E Company, there were 3 guys there, I think, or 4, in foxholes. And they almost shot me. And I said, I need to speak to their commanding officer. See, I knew that if I got permission from an officer, anyone, to go back to the Tyrrhenian Sea, so if we got back, they couldn't charge us with desertion because we were going underwater. So anyway, by the time I got into the pre-OW camp, first of all, in a short period of time, my first escape is when I think I started to learn Italian. I went into the hills. I was trying to get back through the front lines, which was wrong. You never can get through there. Later I changed my mind to go into the Vatican for neutrality. But I wound up in a house with 2 women, and they were making polenta. I never knew what polenta was, but they were making polenta, and they're yelling at me in Italian. We were in American uniforms. There was 3 of us. But one of the guys, Ray DeAngelis, was Italian. He was American, but his parents were Italian. So he did speak just like I knew Yiddish. He speak Italian. Anyway, the first words I learned was "Niente parlato italiano, niente mangiare." And I said, "What the hell is she saying, Ray?" She says, "If you don't speak in Italian, you ain't gonna eat." That's the first words I learned in Italian. And then I started to learn some nasty words. But I was progressing pretty rapidly in Italian and never thought about anything else. Never thought I spoke English that good. So the end result was that I didn't know much about the German Holocaust. Neither did anybody else, really. It was really blacked out a lot. But then I started to hear rumors that they were killing the Jews. And of course, it wasn't as... the rumors weren't as elaborate as it really was going on with the gas and the gas chambers and the crematories and the executions. But I realized that my dog tags, and by this I went in 4 prison camps in Italy. See, they move you up away. The worst thing you can do to an enemy is recapture your prisoners. So they're very, very sensitive about that. They don't want no escapes. If you really want to know about the Great Escape, Hitler personally executed 50 Americans and British, which was against the law of the Geneva Convention. And he shot them. They're buried up there near Poland. But they don't want escapes. And they don't want the Americans to overrun a prison camp and get you back. See, and they don't do that. That's why Private Ryan, I didn't want to get into that with you, I was arguing with Spielberg, is a 4. If he said it was fiction or it was fact that was fictionalized to some degree, that's fine. But he led the public to believe that it was facts, and it wasn't. It was nobody goes after one man, especially a captain in the Marines, leading a squad. That's not done. A squad leader is a corporal, not a captain. So that's a false thing right there. And did you see the way they were marching in Private Ryan? Did you hear the way they were laughing and joking? You know what happened if you did that while you were marching? I would have turned around and shot you. Really, that's what would have happened to me. If I was boisterous, you get the men killed. They were joking about this whole thing. Then they're telling you that they're going after one guy to get him out. You don't do that. I'll tell you a story about General Patton's son-in-law that you wouldn't believe. Okay? General Patton made a boo-boo, a real one there, but they hushed it up real quick again when he crossed into the Rhine River. But I don't want to go into that unless you want to hear it. Very interesting story.
I want to direct you back to the question about...
But the Yiddish.
You're speaking Yiddish,
Yeah.
German...
No. I learned one thing, survival in New York street. And I knew about the SS and the Gestapo. And I knew that the Germans and the Yiddish didn't speak the same language. And I remembered the dictionary. That's why I had to tell you that. It's different, the German language, to some degree. Now, there are several different dialects. One of the dialects, the one I spoke, was Schwabdeutsch. Schwab means cockroach. That's the low form of Bavarian, Schwabdeutsch. And I guess I did get a good education, a self-education, because I was very careful about certain words. And when the Gestapo said, Kaufman, mein Lieber, du bist ein Ganef, I understood most of it. I understood all of it. But I said, I don't understand you. There was one word in there that only a Jew uses, and that was Ganef. You see? So I was able to outsmart him in those areas, and I was very, very careful. My mathematics in German, and in English too, was very, very good. I don't know why. My mathematical, I can count up to 1 million in German. And don't ask me how, I don't know.
Did they suspect you of being a Jew when they captured you?
No, no. The first time, I don't think it happened. You know, I forgot his name. Do you remember the guy that squealed on me? In Augsburg. What happened was in Augsburg, this is about 5 prison camps later. Man, I was more dead than alive. I got 340 men in this camp, assorted from different outfits, all thrown together. Some from my outfit, some Rangers. And I think most of them were from the 179th Regiment, which is the 45th Division. And there's 340 of us thrown together in a camp that's just been built, brand new, nobody's there, Augsburg. It's called Arbeitskommando 663B. They bring in the Geneva Convention, and they tell us in English that we could select our own leader, but he has to be approved by the German commandant. The leader can be called the commandant because the commandant is a German. So the leader is called a Vertrauensmann. We have to ask him what Vertrauensmann means. It means man of confidence. If you twist it around and call it a confidence man, you go to jail. So that's the first time I learned that. Now, the American soldiers, because of my bickering with the Germans seemed to become attracted to me because of my loud voice. And they like when they yell at you. So if you yell louder, that makes you superior. I didn't know that. I didn't do that deliberately. But if they got me mad, I yelled louder than they did. So the next thing I know is the Americans elect me as their Vertrauensmann. Now the law requires you to have a Dolmetscher. This is international law. A Dolmetscher is an interpreter. Now I didn't know that, but I found out later it was a plant. Because this guy spoke, you talk about German, you can see 2 different Germans between me and him. This guy spoke fluent Plattdeutsch, which is a different dialect. His name was Karl Schmier. They appoint him as the Americans, as my Dolmetscher. And I'm telling him, I'm not going to let anybody talk for me. I'm going to talk for myself if I'm doing this. And I did some outstanding things where the men really became proud of me there. They did some stupid things. The men, they came in with a bayonet. Did you read that? Guy comes in with a bayonet that he swapped for a pack of cigarettes on a detail. And he comes in with a bayonet, and the Germans are screaming and they're yelling at me. I'm not allowed to work because I'm the leader of the camp. The leader and the Dolmetscher they are restricted. They can't work. Neither can they escape. If I escaped, that's why I was there so long. If I escaped, I would have been executed by the American government because that's called desertion of my men. So the 2 people that can't escape is the Dolmetscher and the leader.
What were your relationships with the guards or the commandant?
Very good, very good. The Feldwebel was crazy about me. He had come back from the Russian front. He had lost one eye. He was no longer combat effective, and he was the commandant. He's a Feldwebel, which is a sergeant. And he was always yelling at me, and I think I hit it off with him when he gave me a shovel. You remember that? He gave me a shovel. He used to say, Kaufman, mein Lieber, du bist kaputt. And I says, what did I do now? It was never me, it was somebody else that did it, and I'm responsible. And he hands me a shovel one time. And I because she's a lady, I won't use I said some nasty words to him.
What would you say?
I said, well, I have to say in order for you to get the humor in it.
Do it.
I said, fuck you, if you're going to kill me, here's the shovel, you dig the grave. And he says, was ist das, fuck you? So I says, I ain't going to tell you. I says, you figure it out. And this is the kind of conversations I had. And I think he was from Leipzig. And he used to tell me about his family and the stories. So we became pretty friendly.
What about, I read things in your book where your Jewishness was called into question.
Well, okay, now that happened. One of the guys in Arbeitskommando 663, I see his face right in front of me. I heard he got court-martialed for it. He thought there was graft here or something, or there's food, or I don't know what he thought. But I think he told us, see, I'm saying I think, because the Feldwebel one day said to me, Du bist a Jud. He said, you Jewish? I said, no, I'm an American. And I stuck to that. I said, I'm an American. Well, he says, and by the way, I went through with the Gestapo where they kicked the shit out of me trying to find out if I was a Jew in Moosburg, Stalag 7A. And one of the guys said that he's not coming out of there anymore because I was in there too long. But I came out. I won. There was a 22-year-old German lieutenant, a real Aryan, and he insisted I was Jewish, and I insisted I was an American. So I wasn't a Jew. And we got to a point where we started to argue, and he says, well, if you're not Jewish, what's your religion? And I said, no religion. And then he said, you're an atheist. And I says, no, I'm not. He says, what are you, a wise guy? And he's talking in English. He says, you don't believe in religion, you're not an atheist? I says, no. An atheist don't believe in God. I said, I believe in God, I don't believe in religion. I says, how do you figure the two? So he says, I'm an American. It's as simple as that. That's all I am. Americans are free. I can do whatever I want. I can say whatever I want. I believe whatever I want. And he got pretty pissed off at that. So the Feldwebel came in and said to me, you know, the same thing. And I said, no, I'm an American soldier. I didn't deny I wasn't Jewish. I just said I was an American soldier. And I kept doing that. He turned around, he talked to some guy, and some officers came in. He wasn't an officer. He's called an Unteroffizier. Nuncom is what he's called. And he was running the camp. But another guy came in, a lieutenant, and he questioned me, and he says, you know, if you're Jewish, he says, that's okay, but you can't be the commander of the camp. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm an American soldier. He says, you understand Hitler decreed that no Jew can be a leader in Germany. And he explains it to me. A leader is a teacher in a school, a foreman of a shop, and a guy's running a POW camp. You can't be a leader. So I said, I don't know what your problem is. I says, see my uniform? I'm an American soldier. That's what I am, you know. Nobody ever asked me for my dog tags, but except in Moosburg, 7A, the intelligence. It's called the Abwehr, the German intelligence.
How did you know that there was not persecution, but that it wouldn't be advantageous?
We heard rumors. Like I say, we spread it amongst ourselves. See?
What kind of rumors?
The rumors that Germans were killing the Jews. See? They were executing the Jews in Germany. To what extent, we never knew. A concentration camp we never heard of. If you want to read my general's report on when they liberated Dachau, they were shocked. They threw up. And he says, these are combat-hardened soldiers. And they threw up what they saw. The stench was overpowering. And you're talking about most of the executions took place in several concentration camps that most people don't know about, like Treblinka and Buchenwald. That's where the gas chambers were. The gas chamber in Dachau was never operated. It was being built for convenience, but when it was completed, and it is completed today, but it was never put into use because the Americans liberated it in the end before they could put it to use. But the Germans had a big problem when the war wasn't going favorably of concealing the bodies. You don't conceal them when you bury them, because a bulldozer can dig them right up, all of them. So those executions were null and void. So they started to deliver the bodies from the gas chambers in Buchenwald, Treblinka, Mauthausen, Auschwitz. They were putting them on trains, what they call the 40 and 8 cars, the box cars. That's another example. There's one right in, that's where you should go if you've never seen it. If you've ever been to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial, one of the cars is there. They brought the whole car, the freight car.
What's your association with Dachau?
My association was that I was a prisoner there as an American soldier. And I had a claim in there last year. The Germans got clever about it. My attorney in, I forget his name, Moxie, anyway, 168 guys, Americans, were held in Buchenwald. It was against the law. This is a civilian prison. Whether you're a Jew or not means nothing. If you wear an American uniform, which I was wearing, by the way, you can't go to concentration camp. And what happened is, these 168 guys, 2 of them put in a claim against the German government about 10 years ago. They collected $2 million to be divided between them. This lawyer in Washington went against the whole German government, and he told them to put aside funds, and they went along with him for every American soldier that was in another, and they started to correspond with all American POWs if any of us were in a concentration camp.
Well, what are the circumstances which led to your imprisonment?
Well, I was just about to tell you that. When this guy told him I was, anyway, the Feldwebel didn't believe I was Jewish. And we were there 4 months, 3 months, about 3 months. We got our first Red Cross parcels, we had food, we were living like a community, like a family, and the war wasn't anywhere near us. So we were getting peace of mind, and we started to settle down a little bit. Suddenly, they decide they're breaking up the camp, and they're taking us all out of there. So August, September, October. Yeah, we were there August, September, October. They take us, and I don't know, you know, that's a strange thing. I remember all these things, but when it comes to the transportation, I only remember certain instances of how I was traveling, by car or by truck or by bus or by foot. Now, I don't remember how. It's not close. It was a couple of, maybe 50, 100 miles. I got the map here. They transferred me, the 340 of us, to Stalag 7B in Memmingen, Germany, which is called the Hauptlager. It's a main prison camp. And each main prison camp had work camps, details. Now the story that is in my book, that when I got there, I came in with 340 men. There were 900 men already there, mixed up with British, the Russians, the French, but they were divided by barbed wire. But the Americans didn't have a leader when I got to that camp. The 340 Americans told the Germans, I'm their leader. The 900 Americans didn't oppose it. The one guy that opposed it in Augsburg is in this group with me. The next thing I know is it became another story. The Germans go and give us a Red Cross bottle. That's all we had to live on. Otherwise, we ate grass, cats, dogs, whatever we can get our hands on. So we had nothing to eat. This Red Cross parcel weighed 10 pounds. And it's very, very, the guy that made the Red Cross parcel never got credit for it. Wrigley's chewing gum. 340 packages. No, 3,000 packages a month. He packaged within governmental regulations of 10 pounds. If you took anything out of that package, you could never put it back in again. That's how compact it was. And it was done by nutritionists, what we needed. Very clever. Now this is all we had to live on. Now there's tin cans in there. There's corned beef in there. There's powdered milk in there. In tin cans. Salmon, sardines. Now if you open a can, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know. You better eat the whole can. You ain't gonna eat it today and save half of it for tomorrow, because you know what you're gonna get tomorrow. Ptomaine poison. There's no question about it. You can't leave a can of food overnight in the can. You have to eat it. So when I got there, the Germans were issuing the Red Cross parcels, and they had this little doorway. They have a door, visualize a door, that's split in half. The upper portion goes this way, and you got a counter here. So there's 3 Germans behind the counter, and here are 1,200 men lined up for the parcels. I'm tickled pink. I'm going to get my first parcel here. And I'm in the middle of the line. Even though I'm the leader, it doesn't make any difference. One of the guys from the front of the line comes running up to me, and he shows me the Red Cross parcel. He said they're putting a nail in all the cans, and they hit them with a hammer. They're puncturing every can in the parcel. So I ran up to the front and said, hey, hold it. Don't take these parcels. And I started to yell at the Germans. I says, you can't do that. He said, who are you? I says, I'm the elected leader of this camp. I said, you know what you're doing? You're going to force them to eat all this food up right now? They can't eat that food up. They'll die. And if they don't eat it, they'll die anyway, because they're going to get ptomaine poison. I don't know how to say ptomaine in German. I mean, there's a lot of words that I don't know. There's a lot of words I led up to give them some kind of a picture. But I told them, I went like this, they're going to die. Kaput. They wouldn't buy it. They told me to get back in the line. So I said to the men, I'm not taking this package. I don't know what you're going to do. Now that's a dangerous thing to say to men that are starving. So I'm very proud of what happened. They all walked away from the line. The whole 1,200 men. Can you imagine 1,200 starving men walking away from food that are eating cats and dogs and rats? I mean, that's really an accomplishment. But the next morning, this wasn't a German, it was a Czechoslovakian in a German uniform. And he was a captain, Hauptmann Heppeli. And what happened was, he must have read my report from 663B, plus I think this guy must have said something to him. And they call a roll call in the morning, and all 1,200 guys line up, and we're standing there. He tells me to step out. And he's standing there, and they were called Gruppe 3, a group of 3. Heppeli and Tinzel was a lieutenant. He was a lieutenant in the intelligence, and the other guy was dangerous. I don't know what his name was. I don't know what rank he was. He was a very quiet guy, and he's the guy I worried about. And these were comprised of the commandant of this big camp. And Heppeli says to me in German, Hosen runter. Tell me, take my pants off. And I said, warum? Why? He says, du bist a Jude. And I says, are you crazy? I said, in German. I said, du bist verrückt. And you can't say that to a German officer. They don't take it like we do. I said, du bist verrückt. I says, there's 1,200 men there. You tell them all to take their pants off. If 900 remain circumcised, if that's what you're looking for. I says, you know what? You give me your gun and I'll shoot myself right in front of you. I said, that make you happy? Fortunately, Tinzel, the lieutenant, says, hey, I think he's right. He's talking to German. By the way, they didn't, see, that's an old trick the Germans had. They all made believe they didn't speak English until it became convenient for them. Then they said they did. But very rarely did they do that. So Tinzel's telling him in German, when I was in England, he said, I learned that the English get circumcised at all ages for health reasons. So I turned around to him and I said, go ahead, tell Heppeli that we're 500 years ahead of England. That's what I told him. So he told him that, you know. So then he says, I'm trying to get the same. He said, Kaufman, mein Lieber, du bist ein Lump. He says, ich glaube, du bist ein Jud. He says, pass off, he says, watch out. He's telling me that I believe you're a Jew, okay? The next thing I know, 2 hours later, there's 3 armed guards coming into the camp. They're not allowed in the camp with guns. And they come in with rifles. Kaufman, take your stuff. I'm packing up again. I pack up my little package with food, whatever I got. And I'm going with them. And they take me in the little VW. We were jammed into it. And we drive a little ways. We get out of the car. They light up a cigarette. They tell me to get out of the car. He says, see that? In German, he says, that's the Alp Mountains. You know what's on the other side, don't you? I says, no. He says, Switzerland. You know what? He says, for you, the war is over. You get over those mountains. Would you believe the three of them turn around and walk away? And I'm watching them. You know, I'm facing them while they're walking away. And I said, boy, if that ain't the dumbest trick I ever saw, I turn around and start walking that way. They'll put a bullet in my back and say, I'm escaping. Whether they're going to do that or not, I don't know. But I ain't going to take a chance. So I just stood there looking at them. They walked about 50, 60 feet, and they turned around, and they said, it was verrückt. He said, what are you, crazy? He says, don't you want to be free? He says, the war's over anyway. He says, for you, it'll be over if you go over there. They're just waiting for you. They'll give you all the food you want. They'll send you back to America. I says, no, I like it here better. You know, so the next thing I know is they knew where they were taking me. So I assumed that they were going to shoot me after I got to where I went. I never heard of it. I see this big sign right in front of me, Dachau, D-A-C-H-A-U, in big letters. That's the name of the city, okay? That is about, later I found out there's 6 different camps, and they're classified as Dachau, but there's only one Dachau KL, which is a concentration lager, German. The only one. And on the, as we go through the gate, I don't know how I learned that, but I guess from the back of the dictionary again, I'm reading in clear German, very understandable, Arbeit macht frei. Work makes you free. Okay? And I go through the gate. They bring me to the administration building, and I'm walking past all these guys with, you don't have to spell it out to me. They're wearing what they call Morgan Davids, Jewish yellow stars. And on the back of their striped uniforms looked like the Georgia chain gang. I thought I was in Georgia. They had the big written J-U-D-E. That's Jude, Jew. And they had this star in front. All emaciated looking guys, but not any more than I was. But they were emaciated. And a lot of them were more emaciated than others, but I think they were being experimented on, those that were more emaciated, then they were one step ahead of the crematory. And the next thing I know is there's this big administration building in front of me, about 200-300 yards in front. It's this way. It's not a building going this way. It's a building going this way. And it's 2 stories high. And they got the Nazi flags flying over there. And they bring me in there. And I see the bars on the windows. One here and one here and one here and one here. 4 cells in there. And I see the sign on there, the Sonderbarak, which means special cell on the jail cells. They were actually for prisoners, for the German soldiers that were drunk or went AWOL. That's what they were for. They weren't for real prisoners. The rest of the prisoners were outside in barracks. That's a big mistake they made. They destroyed history. They took the barracks down after the war. That was a very bad blunder, because they should have left it there and disinfected it and let it stay there for time immemorial to see how we, because you only got a picture of what I'm telling you. You have to see this, of how they lived. If I try to tell you, I can't even tell you the problem. Even if I was an artist, it's unbelievable. So to destroy that and put pebbles in those areas where the barracks were, that was a disgrace to history. It really was. But that's what they did. But the building remained, the administration building and the crematory and the chamber, the gas chamber, which never was used, remained. It's there.
How long were you there?
For 5 days, November the 15th to November the 20th of 1944.
Why do you think that who do you think was responsible for putting you there?
Captain Epperly. He told me he's gonna kill you. He says, when he says, my translation of what he said was, Kaufman, mein Lieber, du bist kaputt. That means, Kaufman, you're dead. He kept telling me that, okay?
So whatever happened to him?
I killed him.
Explain that.
Well, let's see if I remember now. Boy, that's pretty good, 55 years. Three of us escaped. On April the 8th, the Germans made a mistake. They put me out on a farm to work, telling me they're going to build me up. And I get plenty of food on the farm and all that. And I think I arrived on the farm on, it's just a guess, either March 30th or March 31st. And the first day I was on the farm, I meet Ray Hurst on the other farm. Ray Hurst escaped with me 15 months before from the studio. We were in a prison, and it was called, it's Cinecittà. You know what that is? That's the Roman studio. There were 3,000 of us in that. The Germans converted it to a prison camp. And there's a lot of stories about that. Anyway, Ray escaped with me from that camp, from the studio. But that wasn't a planned escape. See? So when I met him, he was an ex-paratrooper. He was emaciated too. The two of us were emaciated. And he's working with this guy who had a weird name, Homer Hansel. This guy weighed 210 pounds. He looked like he was in the American Army. I mean, he didn't look like he was a prisoner of war. Ray said he was captured at the Belgian Bulge just a couple of months before. So the malnutrition or anything didn't affect this guy. So he says, what the hell are you doing here? So I said, that's a long story, Ray, but I'm telling you one thing. I says, I contacted the French underground yesterday, and they're bringing me a map tomorrow, and they're bringing me a Hungarian compass. That's the best they can do. I said, that's all I need. I said, you want to go? He said, when? I said, well, let me get the map and look at it first. Let me get the compass. I said, it's another thing the Rangers trained me, how to box a compass. Only the Navy knows that. I wasn't in the Navy. I could still do it. And how to shoot an azimuth. So that was all special training. So I said to him, let's wait until tomorrow. And we're picking potatoes on the next farms to each other. And what happens is that by the 7th, I think it was that close, or was it the 6th of April? That means I was there 6 or 7 days on the farm. I don't know where they slept, but we met every day at 6 o'clock in the morning on the farm. We worked all day. I said, I think it was the 6th. I says, you know, Ray, if we don't go tomorrow, we'll go the next day. I says, and when we leave, we're going to have to leave like the minute we get on the farm, like 6 o'clock in the morning. Now, the only way to do that is these guys are not armed, the farmers and his daughters. I said, so the only thing we can do is take a chance, and it's about 500 yards, and we're not in good condition, is run the 500 yards into the woods. Once we get into the woods, I said, they'll probably call the military. I says, so we'll have to go on a fast march and get in as deep as we can into the woods. So Ray says, what about the dogs? The Germans were great with dogs. I says, I'll take care of that when we get into the woods. Anyway, it wasn't the next day. I think it was the next day that I told him, we're leaving tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock. This is what happened. Now, at 6 o'clock in the morning, we made a run for it. We got into the woods. The farmer was yelling bloody murder. Anyway, Ray wouldn't go without this guy Homer, because he figured we need some strength here, and the two of us, unarmed, we're going to get recaptured. And he said, I don't want to get that. He was from Texas. So I said, well, okay. I said, but I don't want any trouble. I said, I'm not the leader of this thing. Nobody's a leader. You want to go your way, you go your way. I'm going my way, because I know where I'm going. I'm going to Switzerland. And so I said, okay, if you want to go with me, we'll discuss where I'm going. You can discuss where you're going, and he can discuss where he's going, and we'll make up our minds when we get into the woods. The first thing we did is I told them take off their shoes, and we put pepper in our socks. We had pepper in the Red Cross parcels with salt, and we dumped all the pepper into our socks. I read somewhere that dogs are not going to follow that scent, and that was true. They wouldn't come. Otherwise, we heard them barking, but they were going the wrong way. They were going the wrong way. So it worked. Anyway, the rest is on the map. We were heading for Switzerland. They decided, well, anyway, what happened was, along the way, they decided that they're going to go to Switzerland with me instead of trying to go through the front lines, whichever way that was, because I had no idea, really. They were surrounded by Russians and Germans, and it's a good thing, because a lot of Russians took the Americans and took them to Siberia and Odessa. We found that out later. And they didn't want to make us think about that, or we got a war with Russia. And that's a story by itself, and to make it quick, so you get the reason for that, so there's no doubt in your mind.
So Ray and the others.
So anyway, let's see if I get the chronology right. Ray, Homer got killed. He saw we were passing a farm, and he was going to go and get the chickens. Now, he wasn't trained like Ray and I. I mean, we didn't want to be trained on a starvation diet, but we were on starvation diets for already 15 months. He was just captured, and all he wanted was food, and that was uppermost in his mind. And he didn't like the rations I doled out. Like, I wrote it down, like a corned beef can for lunch today, 3 ways, we split it, or a D-ration bar between the 3 of us to make us last, because we didn't know how long we were going to be without food, plus what we get along the way. Homer stepped out of line while we had different ways. We slept during the day and moved during the night, and my goal was never to come out of the woods, and I almost succeeded until one time. That was a real scene for the movies. That one time that we stepped out of the woods by accident. It was really funny, but it was scary. Anyway, Homer went after the chicken, and he was in an SS Gestapo area, SS stormtroopers on maneuvers, and they killed him. Okay, Ray and I took off. The next thing that happened was, I remember this date very clearly. It was April the 12th. And I wouldn't have remembered this date if something else didn't happen that I found out in the United States. I meet up with 3 Frenchmen up in the woods. They walk across us. What we were doing was we were taking shifts and sleeping. One guy stays awake, the other guy goes to sleep, etc., etc. And then as soon as it starts getting dark, then we start moving. Well, the guy, one of the Frenchmen, he looks at Ray and says, "American?" And Ray looks at me because he don't speak German. The French all spoke German. They were prisoners. So I said, "Who are you?" In German. So he says, "You Englander? You're from England?" I said, "No, who are you?" He says, "We're from the Free French." So I said, "What are you doing here?" He says, "We're prisoners. We work on the farm down there." And he points to the farm. We're up on top of a mountain. The woods went up. I said, "Okay." I said, "We're Americans. We escaped from a farm, a dorf," I said. They don't use the word farm, they use the word dorf. I said, "We escaped from a dorf." So he says, "Where are you going?" I said, "We're going to Switzerland." I said, "But we have very little food and we need food." And he says to me, we'll get you the food." He said, "Will you be here when we come back?" I said, "Yeah." "Are you going to bring us the food from the farm?" He says, "Yeah." So he says, so now I said, you know what, if you help us, I says, I'm a captain in the United States Army. I don't know and I take out my Social Security card. By the way, I carried also my possessions in a condom for water protection. It was tied in the knot, see? And I took out the Social Security card. And I said to him, this is my credentials. He don't speak English, what the hell? I'm telling him in German, these are my credentials. I'm an American captain. You write your name down for me, and I'll see that you're rewarded by the American Army, you know? He said, fine. So he says, you know what? He says, I got to tell you this. You know what happened this morning? I said, no. He says, you don't know that Franklin Roosevelt died? I said, no, I don't know. I says, what happened? He said, I don't know. He says, all I know is he died, and Truman is the new president of the United States. I said, really? He says, yeah. So I says, okay. I says, you know what? I says, it's going to get dark. I says, we want to get the food for us and come back? He says, yeah. How am I going to find you? You're going to be here? I says, no. I says, you walk up here. You know Tipperary? And I whistle Tipperary. He says, yeah. I says, can you whistle that? He says, yeah. You come up to this area and keep on walking in this direction and whistle Tipperary, and we'll come out to you. Okay? I said, fine. He walks away. Ray says to me, what are you, crazy? He said, what are you doing? I said, these guys are full of shit. I said, do you know who the vice president is of the United States when I left? It was Henry Wallace. I said, he's saying Truman is the president? I said, what kind of shit is that? This is the story I got. So I said, that's a lot of crap. So I says, he said, what do you mean? You're not going to wait for these guys? I says, no. I said, we'll get our food along. We'll manage what we got. And we just walked away. Right after they left, we left. Okay? Of course, they came back. I'm assuming that. And that was the end of that. But then I went out of my way, and I said to Ray, I'm going to leave you here. You don't have to wait for me. I said, but there's Memmingen right there. We're passing Memmingen on the way to Friedrichshafen, which is a historic city on the Bodensee Sea. We had to cross that to get to Switzerland. I said, but I'm not going to, I got a personal thing here that I got to take care of. And outside the prison camp, Stalag 7B, was these little cabins, one-room cabins. There was you can't call it a kitchen, but there was a stove in there and a bed and the whole works. And I didn't tell you the whole story because I'm skipping a lot of stuff. But one of my best friends was a German dog. His name was Polo. And as long as I live, I'll never forget that dog, because a lot of my life depended on him. This dog was decorated by the Germans on the Russian front. He was decorated, and he was relieved of duty because of so much combat, and he was put on guard duty, like a human being, in a prison camp. But Polo and I were like this, and nobody knew that, because I used to give him the sugar that I got from the Red Cross parcel. When we were standing in line, I used to stand there with the sugar in my hand like this here, and the captain used to walk down with looking at the back of the heads and looking at the guys, and Polo was eating the sugar out of my hand. So after about 2 months of that, Polo, if I didn't have any sugar in my hand, he used to grab my hand with his mouth and pull it, because I did it deliberately. I wanted to see what would happen if he didn't get the sugar. So I knew I made a friend. The dog was 12 years old, and I think that's about 50 years old in a human life. I don't know, but he was an old dog, a German Shepherd. And I really liked that dog. If I could have got it, I would have brought him back. Anyway, why am I telling you about this? I walk into the cabin very quietly, and there's Heppeli. He's got his pants on, no shoes. He's got a winter undershirt on, underwear, long sleeves, and his gun is hanging on a handmade belt 2 inches wide. You could see the way it was pointed, that he cut it with a scissor. It was handmade, and it's hanging on the poster of the bed. Beside the night table, there's a jar of water or something, and a box of bullets. And I'm looking at the bullets as I see .32, so I know he's got a .32 Luger in there. Okay, but whether there's bullets in the gun or not, I don't know. Anyway, Polo got up. And when he got up, I took the sugar that I had with me. I sprinkled it on the floor. And he got very busy. He went all over licking up the sugar. They were cubes, domino, yellow box of sugar was little cubes like dice. And I just sprung a handful all over the floor, like maybe 12, 15 of them, and I had more. And I went up to the bed, and this guy's snoring to beat the band. And I opened up the flap from the holster, and I took out the gun, and I got near him, and I pulled the slide back. Now, I did that for a reason, to see if there's any bullets in there. And the bullet ejected and flew out, and I let the slide go forward. Now, the slide went forward, and that, you know what that does, don't you? Puts another bullet in the chamber. When he heard that, he opened his eyes and looked up, bewildered. And I just shot him in the head. But when I wrote about it, somebody said, you just don't do it that way. You got to make it melodramatic. So I said, what do you mean? He says, just say something to him before you killed him. So I said, well, the only thing I could say to him is, Auf Wiedersehen, Hauptmann happened. He says, that's right. That's what you put in the book. That's what the editor told me to do. So that's what's in the book, but it's not true, that part. It's, what do you call that, embellished? Yeah. So I put that in the book. And, but I was so traumatized that there's no way I would, you do that in the movies, you know. Then I took the gun, and I knew that it was loaded. I put it back in the holster, took the holster, put it around my waist, and I took the box of bullets. I don't know how many bullets there were in it, 20, I think. And there was 7 in the gun. But now I only had 5 left in the gun, because one I ejected, and the other one. And what happened was, I got out of there, and Ray was waiting for me. It was very nice of him. And we went on to Switzerland. Now that's a story by itself. We got to Friedrichshafen, and some woman tried to help us and made us sick. She sent her son over, a little boy, about 12 to 18 years old. We're on the beach of Friedrichshafen, which is a honeymoon resort. And that's where not the Graf Zeppelin, the Hindenburg was built. That big Zeppelin, it was built in Friedrichshafen. And anyway, she sends over a bag with food with the kid. And I take a look, it's fried prunes and fried apricots. I mean, dried fruits. So Ray and I, we grab and we start eating. But boy, did we get thirsty. And you know what happens when you get thirsty and eat dry fruits? Don't ever drink nothing. I never thought about it. It starts expanding in your stomach. And our stomach was shrunk to the size of a dime from starvation. So I thought we were both going to die on the beach there. It was just unbelievable. But we wound up with dysentery, which helped us to clear all that crap out, you know. So that was another escapade. And the other escapade was a shocker when I said, I see Zurich, and I said to Ray, man, I could swim that. Now this water from the Bodensee Sea, in English is called Lake Constance on the English map. But I used to swim across the Hudson River when I was 18 years old under the George Washington Bridge. That was twice as wide as this. And the only thing I worried about was German patrol boats going up and down, plus the fact that I didn't know the Bodensee Sea, the water, is generated from the Alp Mountains. The ice that melts in the summer forms so you can imagine how cold that thing is. What do you think Ray says to me? That was the biggest shock of my life. I thought everybody knew how to swim. I thought everybody knows how to ride a bike, but that's not true. That's the first time I found that out, that he didn't know how to swim. So we had to change our tactics entirely and move down the line to a place called Singen. There's a bridge there, heavily guarded, that walks into Switzerland, to a border town. And I saw a lot of debris laying there, and I see a board. It looks like a door with a doorknob missing that's laying there. I said, you know what, Ray? I said, trust me. We'll take all our clothes off tonight when it gets dark, and we'll take our undershirt, which is an army shirt, and we'll make a sack out of it and put all our clothes into there, and we'll tie the arms, the sleeves, and put all our stuff into there. You put it in yours, I'll put it in mine, and we'll take that door. I says, and what happens is, you hold on to the door, and we'll be nude. And you hold on to the door, and I'll hold on to the door, and I'll get us across. You don't have to swim. Just, all you have to do is kick, and if you don't kick, my kicking will get us across. It's just that we got to get across fast enough to get in between the patrol boats going this way and this way. You know, they got long trips to make, but they're guarding the border. And he looked at me, and you know something? I think he was afraid of water. But because of the way I said it, I think he was thinking maybe of backing out in the last minute and not showing me that he was scared. But he didn't back out. And we went across. And that's how we got into Switzerland. We got up and dried ourselves with the shirt, with the undershirts. But we were, you know, something we should have been, what do you call that? Hypothermic, yeah. With all that cold water and everything, but I guess with all that kicking, we were being forced to kick even more in order to stay warm, if you know what I'm saying. The water was so cold. And there was no ice in the water. It's just the water from the ice that came down from the Alp Mountains and funneled its way into the Rhine River, I guess. But anyway, we got across. But that was another blunder. There was more Germans there than there was on this side. And we would never get to Geneva. Of course, Geneva was on the other side of Switzerland, which I had no idea how far it was. And Geneva was the neutral territory. And from what I heard about the two cities we were in, was Zurich and Basel, they were turning guys like me over to the Germans the next morning. So I said to Ray, we got to go back. He said, go back where? I said, I have to go to the front lines. He said, how are you going to do that? I still got the map here. I said, well, we got to get back across. I said, the only thing is we got to go in another direction, and we'll have to go through the Black. I had a thing with woods. I says, and the Black Forest is over there. I says, I imagine the American troops must be somewhere near there by now. I said, so we'll go through the Black Forest, you know. And that's what we did. And another coincidence, just like with my unit, and I yelled at my general, you had to go in there April 29th to Dachau. Why didn't you come on November the 14th when I was there? On the 15th, you would have liberated before I got there. So, you know, I tease him. But what happened was, we got into the Black Forest. And the next thing I know, we're moving pretty fast, the two of us, and we wound up in Alsace-Lorraine, in Sagimund. Okay? And lo and behold, I see American soldiers all over the place with trucks and everything. And you talk about coincidence? I take a look, 100th Division patches. That's where I went over my first unit when I got into the Army. The first time I got a uniform was in Fort Jackson, South Carolina with the 100th Division with, what's his name, Captain Karras, who got me into this whole cycle of where I wound up with. And and I'm telling the guys, you think they believe me? They don't even believe I'm an American because we had beards, and we were filthy with lice. And that was a common thing with us. We had long hair, dirty, hungry, starved, emaciated. Finally, the G2, they sent G2 down, the Army Intelligence, and I convinced the district attorney, told me not to put it in.
Oh, really? Oh.
So it's the only fictitious name in the book.
Heinrich, what's his name?
That's, oh, you see, you're not. You know why? I was just telling them, the district attorney told me what I did was murder. It wasn't part of the military. Because I was in no jeopardy and no danger of being harmed, and I went out of my way to get him. See, the fact that I was unarmed doesn't mean anything, but the fact that I was premeditating it. He's a district attorney here for 32 years. He says, I wouldn't put that down, Henry. He says, because if he's got a grandson and he wants to bring charges against you, he says, you don't need that. So, you know, I learned very quick. So I said, what's the big deal? I changed the guy's name. And that's what I did. Because you won't see the name I just told you, Hepeli. His name was Hauptmann Hepeli. Yeah, he was a Czechoslovakian. So I did pretty good to associate the two guys.
Good thing, I mean, he's grandson could also hear what a schmuck he was.
Well, I don't know if he was a schmuck, because most of these guys, you know, you wonder, you know, I did some stupid things in my life and trying to analyze things. I have a very analytical mind, and some of it is really weird. And I said to myself, a lot of times, what if Roosevelt wasn't the president here? What if Hitler was the president and decided to do away with Congress and Senate and become the dictator? And then he took all of us and made us soldiers and told us to go kill the Germans. Okay? What would we do? Because that's what a lot of these Germans did. And the excuse that they had when they were nailed, every one of them had the same excuse. The first excuse was with the concentration camps. We didn't know it was there. Bullshit. They're living right across the street. You could smell. You know what a burnt body smells like? Or a decayed body? I never finished that part of the story. The bodies, they decided, I cut that off. When they decided that they were burying these bodies, that they were gassing and shooting, and the war was coming to an end, they figured, oh man, this is against the law. Hitler gave an order, get all these bodies and send them to the only crematory. And nobody ever checked that. The only crematory was in Dachau, Buchenwald, and Auschwitz. They didn't have crematories. So they were transferring the bodies. Then they got the idea of transferring them alive, figuring, and they figured right, that they would die in the boxcars without water, without food, and that's what they did. They kept them in there for 10, 20 days, driving in these 40 and 8 cars. Now, I drove in those, I was in those cars. You got to see them in Washington. They're called 40 and 8s from, no more?
What was finish the story?
Well, the story is, I met the 100th Division, saw, the G2 was convinced that the two of us were ex-prisoners of war, that we had escaped. He checked with somebody, I don't know how. Our serial numbers were the key to the whole thing. Oh, by the way, when I escaped in Rome, did you read that part where I got on the television, on a radio station? You remember that? That was dumb. That was...
Let that be that's a great, I actually do remember that, let that be the
Yeah,
last story.
yeah,
while we're
yeah.
filming this.
So, but anyway, they put me from Sagimund, where they occupied the forces. They brought me in a truck, to a 2.5-ton truck to Saarbrücken, which is the capital of Alsatia, which is not far away from Saarbrücken, from Sagimund. And they put us on a train that was already there. A passenger train was jam-packed. And they said to me, the next stop is in the morning. This was at night. I had no idea what time it was. It's Paris, France. And then we had a run-in with when we got out in Paris, the Gare du Nord. I think it was the Gare du Nord, a main train station. So Ray and I are walking, we look like bums, lousy, dirty, filthy, with a little package, a cardboard package, with a rope. That's we carrying our food, our belongings in there. And there's an MP standing there, and I walk up to him and I said, we were with the 100th Division in Saarbrücken, in Sagimund, and we had escaped from Germany, and they told us to come here to go to the Red Cross. He's right across the street, he says. I said, oh, thank you. Walk across the street, and lo and behold, it's the British Red Cross, 2 British women there. And they're going like this, don't come in here, you're filthy, you're lousy. She says, you have to be deloused. And I look at it and I says, now you got to remember this. At this time, this was April 23rd, the war was still going on. They don't know nothing about prisoners, okay? And we didn't know that until the next morning or the next day. Anyway, they send us to a gas chamber, believe it or not, in France. And that's how they delouse you. That's the only way to get the lice off of you. But there's always the possibility of the eggs of the lice remaining in your hair, not hatched, in the hair, the pubic hair. So what they do is they wipe you with kerosene after you come out. you walk through a gas chamber with a gas mask. That kills everything that's chlorpicarin. I told you I had gas warfare training. And that gas was chlorpicarin. You can't use Lewis cider mustard gas because that leads you up. It'll kill you. So, but the chlorpicarin is what do they call that? For the breathing, a respiratory gas that kills you from breathing. So you wear a gas mask. So that was the funniest thing I ever saw if you took a picture of it. Here I am standing in the nude. There's Ray standing in the nude. All our clothes is in a wire basket, and I'm making it fast and short. And I'm wearing Hatley's gun in the nude. I refuse to put the gun in there. And I'm walking through the gas chamber, which is about as big as this room. And I come out the other side of the door. They're looking at us through glass windows. And when I come out, the guy gives me back my basket with clothes. Same clothes. I got dressed. And I never let that gun out of my hands. I only had 8 bullets left. I got in a gun battle along the way before I got back. Before I got out of Germany, we got in a gun battle. And I only had 8 bullets left. And that's the way it is today, right now, in Andersonville with the 8 bullets. And I got a letter, I got a newspaper, maybe you want to see it, I don't know, from the Atlanta Constitution. The reporter called me. He says, "Are you Henry Kaufman?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Are you the one that's in the Andersonville Museum?" I says, "Yeah." "Why?" He says, "I'm a reporter for and he gives me his name, for the Atlanta Constitution." I never heard of it. Then they find out it's the biggest paper in Atlanta. And they were a driving force behind me. And when I got out of the service, people thought I was crazy. I went to work within 3 days, immediately after the service, and never stopped working. And what I did was, I neglected my wife, I neglected my children, and I didn't realize what I was doing until 1990, that all the POWs were doing the same thing, most of them. They were blocking out the trauma that we all had by occupying their minds, most of them. A lot of them, like from Vietnam, did it in another manner. They used drugs and liquor. Now what happened to me was, I got sick. I wasn't sick. I kept on working. 2 years ago, 2 years ago, the whole world caved in on me. It's like a car that never gets a tune-up. That's what happened to me. First they detected, by the way, I'm 180% disabled. You never heard of that. You can only get 100%. I'm 180% disabled. And 2 years ago, on November the 10th, I got hit pretty bad. They found the cancer on my lung. I went to John Wayne Cancer Institute. They took it out. They took out the upper left lung. And that scared me because all of a sudden I was losing my breath now. I had to give up tennis. I was very, very active besides working in sports and swimming and tennis. So I guess that's what kept me up to where I was going. But like I said, the whole world, not taking any tune-ups. You get pneumonia and you keep on working. And I've had everything. I've had diphtheria, scarlet fever, yellow jaundice. You want to keep going, I'll name you. I can be a doctor. And I didn't even go to school. And anyway, the last, in between that, I think you're getting the picture already. Last September, I went to Myrtle Beach in South Carolina. And the first thing that happened is I couldn't get there by plane. So we tried a new experience. We took the Amtrak. And suddenly they stopped the train in Arizona. They get the paramedics coming on. And they think I had a heart attack. Now they're going to take me off the train. I paid $3,300 for a round trip on that train with a compartment and bed. What happened is, much to my surprise, I can't take altitude. I wasn't even aware of that. I thought Arizona was flat land. Instead, the altitude was too high for me. When I was climbing up to the upper bunk, okay, my heart started to race or whatever. I got high blood pressure, among other things. And they were going to take me into the hospital for 3 days in the cardiac care center. I had to sign about 40 waivers before I refused to go. And the train told me that they're not going to allow me to come back. They're going to commit themselves to the rest of the trip, but they're not going to allow me to come back. Anyway, make a long story short, when I got back, a whole lot of things started to happen. And my kidneys failed on January 28th, both of them. If you get your normal kidneys are, the creatinine is 2. That's the highest number you're supposed to have. I was walking around 1.3, and you're probably walking around 1.2, and that's normal for both kidneys. If you lose a kidney, you can still live. There's no problem. But if you lose both of them, forget it. Okay, they can't even transplant a kidney. They give you dialysis, but it's... Both my kidneys went to 6.9. At 5 point, what's the bad part? You don't know it, because the kidneys don't show it. Now this is recent. This is right up until now. But what the kidneys did was cause anemia by not filtering out the blood, the toxic waste. That was causing me to start reeling and getting weaker and weaker. And I thought I was overcoming the lung situation. I was getting my strength back, and I had my normal weight. But I wound up with 6 pints of blood in 8 days in the Veterans Hospital. Gave me 4 biopsies and missed the kidneys 4 times. They punctured the duodenum, causing internal bleeding. And like the doctor said, he says, you used up 11 of your 9 lives. He said, you used up 11 of your 9 lives. You better call it quits now, you know, because I don't know how I'm here today. And my poor wife, she never knows when I'm going to die. And I got all the arrangements at Arlington, and she don't want to hear it.
So I have a question.
But I'm a lucky guy.
Yeah.
I got to hear. I'm talking to you, so, you know, I don't know how much more time I got, but I got everything in order.
We have a doctor on premises.
The guy, I'm afraid if he saw my